Now, let's get to that person there on the right that sort of looks like me when I haven't had two children all week in a power cut and slightly less sleep than I would like. However, that is me. And my name's Toby. I currently am a GM of product at Xero. I also have the privilege of being a co-founder of Collab and everything we get to do to help product people. And I've had a career throughout product. I was very lucky early in my career to start it in product, and so count myself lucky to have gone through all the stages of a product career, from the early days of just learning the craft as a product manager, now to leading a much broader, fantastic team here at Xero of many talented product managers and group product managers, and getting to work at more of an executive level as well. So a little bit about my career, which I'll talk to now, because I think it's applicable if you are looking at this transition from being a product manager to a product leader, to sort of understand how I've gone through that transition as well. So my career started at Trade Me, and I was lucky enough to, well, not lucky, we shouldn't say lucky when it takes a lot of hard work and putting yourself out there to get into product roles. So for those of you who are just starting out, that was certainly what I did. I put my hand up and said, look, I think this looks really interesting, this idea of solving these customer problems we have, working with our technology teams and finding that fusion of ideation and actual cold, hard building of software. And so I was very lucky at Trade Me to get a chance to do that and then be able to prove myself within that. And probably the first thing that started in terms of this transitional path from being a product manager to being a product leader started at Trade Me, where I continued to look at where there were opportunities to lead more complex and larger products. And so, I would certainly say, as you look to grow in your product career and as you look to transition more into leadership roles, first and foremost, challenge yourself to find the more complex and larger products within your business to be able to flex your leadership skills across. The more complex and larger a product initiative is, the more it requires leadership. There's more people to coordinate. There's more sort of complex problems to bring others in to help solve, and more of a need for the leadership skills. So that's what I did at Trade Me. I was lucky enough to lead what was our Insights platform, which is a platform for those in New Zealand who may know, where you can go and check your property prices and estimates. And no, sorry, I cannot help change those property prices. But that was a really good learning experience for me, and also where I started to pick up the first part of considering a move into product leadership. And so the second thing I would say here is, if you're interested in the transition to product leadership, think about the good leaders that you have around you. And so what I really started to do as I moved sort of through my time at Trade Me was, who were these great leaders that I really respected, that I could see doing great product leadership, and how could I emulate what they were doing? And so I made sure to really consider those people and make sure I got time with them. And so do not underestimate the power of reaching out to leaders and asking for a coffee, or asking to sit down and understand why they're doing certain things or what they are thinking about within your product area and why. You're going to pick up what they think about, and that can be quite different to how you see the world as an IC product practitioner. If you can understand that, then you start to understand what you need to build as strengths or ways of thinking that can allow you to transition into product leadership yourself. Now, from Trade Me, fantastic company, really enjoyed my time there. I moved to Rome Digital, which was more of a product consultancy, and that continued my, I would say, transition into leadership, product leadership, because it forced me to the forefront of leading both products, but also working with, I guess, wider stakeholder groups like customers who are paying you to build product. And that's where I think I managed to get much more comfortable from a leadership perspective of standing at the front and leading your product. And so if you do want to transition to product leadership, I think you need to become comfortable with being fully accountable for your product area or the product that you lead, and being able to step up and communicate the value of that and bring others on that journey. Now, that's that very classic communication, etc., as part of that. But I think it's also a shift in your mentality, which was very much part of what we did at Rome Digital, where you need to lead that space. And because we worked with a lot of companies to build from 0 to 1 products, you have to do a lot of thinking of how are you going to simply innovate and evolve that area. And so the other area you want to think about when transitioning to product leadership is, how can I lead this space? Where are we going? What are we doing? Rather than just deliver the roadmap that's there, what is the roadmap I'm going to build? Where are we going to take this? How can this be successful? And so if you start to break out of that, let's just deliver the features that are pretty obvious and told to us, and more to thinking about the area, thinking about the industry, thinking about competitors within that, the more you start to build a leadership brain that allows you to consider multiple possibilities and how you execute on those. And then finally, to Xero, where I've spent the last little while in a number of years in different roles, which have all been fantastic, but very much around stepping into people leadership and understanding how to do that. And probably something to point out here is the transition for me into leadership did not come just because a role opened up and I decided to step into it. Throughout my time at Rome and then into Xero, I really immersed myself in learning about product leadership. So read a lot of books, which I'll share with you very shortly. Had a number of strong sort of executive level mentors that I would talk to about what product leadership looked like what they sort of want to see in a leader at the next level. And then really started to build my own opinions and thoughts around what leadership was. And I think that is an extremely important part of transitioning to product leadership. You cannot transition to product leadership and just hope that you will then start to work it out. You need to start thinking now about what type of leader are you? What do you think good product leadership looks like based on what you might read or you might observe? And how would you articulate that? What's your opinions? What's your principles around how you would enact yourself as a leader? And of course, you do not need to be a people leader to already be doing product leadership. So you can start to build some of those capabilities and those principles, which you would then apply as you start to move into people leadership as well. The final part there, I think I would just like to call out throughout this career I've had and the transitions I've done through to leadership is take the opportunities that you see. So I have always taken every opportunity as they come along. At Trade Me, it was things like hackathons where I could put my hand up and do further leadership outside my pod, my team, and actually lead another group of people and another product. I've put my hand up for, scary presentations or things that needed to be done outside of my general role and that thrust me a little bit more into leadership of a different thing. Right through to, picking up the gnarly special projects that feel like an additional amount of work. But when you look at them, they're a chance to flex that leadership muscle outside of your current role and bring a few more proof points to what you do as a leader. So very much recommend taking those opportunities, looking for those opportunities that might allow you to do more outside your role to build your product leadership. Okay. Hopefully that was a little insight into my career, but I'll open it up to questions in a moment because that's where the real gold will come. The other thing I wanted to share is just a couple of quotes to have a think about. I think these are nice and reflect what you need to start thinking about in terms of transitioning from those IC roles into leadership. And the first is from John Maxwell. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The leader adjusts the sails. And the reason I like this quote is because I think if you want to transition to leadership, you need to adjust the sails. And by that, I mean, you need to take leadership to make that move. If you're a pessimist and you're in a role, oh, it's never going to happen. Yep, it probably won't if you're waiting for some opportunity to come along and hope that it works. If you're an optimist that's sort of just sitting there hoping the world will deliver it, I think it will take a long time. But if you take charge of that transition and you decide that you do want to go after product leadership, go adjust the sails, go look at the ways that you can start to make that happen. And, whether it's discovering those opportunities, reaching out to people to start getting that guidance, or really pushing yourself to think and learn about product leadership, then you can start to take charge of making that transition. The second quote I'll share with you is probably one I like that starts to speak about what I would look for in product leaders a little bit, which is great leaders are almost always great simplifiers who can cut through argument, debate, and doubt to offer a solution everybody can understand. I think if you want to start transitioning to product leadership, you need to start thinking about how can you take complex areas, complex things that are happening within a team, and simplify. And how do you translate that to a broad range of people that will be throughout a company? And this goes for things like product leadership interviews as well. If you're in an interview for a leadership role and you're unable to, really simplify and explain things in a clear and concise way, I think it can be very hard to get across your thinking and your approach as a leader to be able to provide that concise direction that is generally needed across all areas of leadership. So that one's from Colin Powell. And then the final one from one of the product leaders out there you may know, Ravi Mehta. Product managers build products, which is hopefully what some of you are doing. And product leaders build products, people, and companies. So if you're transitioning to product leadership, start to widen that scope of what you think about. Don't just think about building products and delivering and executing those and all the good things like discovery and finding value, but think about people and business. How do you drive commercial outcomes? What does good people leadership look like? What's important to people when they grow? Consider those things as well. And as I said, start to build your opinions and your thoughts about what that may look like. And that transitions very nicely from Ravi's quote to something I do like to share a lot, which is a 3x3 matrix to consider around product leadership. And I hope this sort of helps you consider areas of thought that you can put into what it might be that you need to grow or consider as you start a transition into product leadership, or if you're in product leadership and you want to start building on these. And so that is that on the left-hand side are your three main areas of product leadership. You need to think about people, whether that is the people you manage or just stakeholders, culture, and people within your business. Operations. So product leadership also does include operations, and don't get turned off by the idea of process and things like that. It is important where you think about how does your team operate? How can you do things well? How do you build a really highly effective and impactful team in terms of the way they operate? And then the final one, of course, pretty obvious, the product. So everything from product strategy to the product you own, to thinking about how you build a scalable and commercialized product. Now, what you want to apply to that is some thinking about how do you do this at an execution level? So how do you think about the planning and the actual execution of these things like people, operations, or product? The impact you create as a leader, how do you actually make sure that you're creating impact in each of these areas? And then the final one is optics. And that is one I always emphasize a lot because it's usually forgotten, which is how you actually ensuring that people are aware, bought in, and supportive of what you're doing in each of those three areas, whether that is your team members who you need to lead, and so you need to ensure they trust and believe in you, or right through to the optics of your product. Does the business know the value of it? Do they understand where you're taking it and what you're planning to do to ensure you drive value in the business? So think about the optics of how you build your area as a product leader. And those are just some examples of the different things you can consider in these areas. I'll pause there and just see if anyone had any questions on that whirlwind of a tour and what we got to here on the 3x3 leadership matrix. Any questions in general for those who have joined us on the call?
Hi, Toby.
Hi, Tanya.
Hello.
I thought I could hold out the awkward silence for a good long time, so thanks for coming in.
Thank you. My main question with all of these things that we need to do, learn, improve, how do you find time in your day-to-day life? How do you organize your day when you need to jump from really high level strategy view, really high level thinking into details and then back, and then people management, and then all of these things? One thing that I struggle when you just transitioning is how can you organize your day so that you're still in control, you're still effective, you know how you grow, and you're not totally in massive things that you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very, very good question. Look, I wish I could tell you there is some beautiful calendar structure I have. I wake up at 4 a.m. And, do magical things to do it all, which is not the reality. Like sometimes my days are chaotic and not a lot is structured. But I do think what's really important to your point, Tanya, is if you are transitioning into leadership, you need to learn how to prioritize and prioritize your time. And so it's not that you have to now suddenly do 3 times more work and 3 times more things, because now you got to think about people, and now you got to think about, 10,000-foot strategy and then go into the detail of a particular workflow with a team. You have to just prioritize and make some tough calls where you will have to put down some things, and you won't be able to attend that particular meeting or thing that is happening, because you have to make a choice to prioritize your time and put leadership into something else. So that's how I will tend to operate. Generally, my people are my top priority. So I will do my best to ensure I'm prioritizing time that I have with them. So every direct report has an hour one-on-one every week, because I want to make sure we have that time to cover everything from their growth to the work that we're doing together. Sometimes I'll have to shift those around as I try and handle the executive meetings that come in and things like that. But generally, I would not like to bump them every week for 3 weeks in a row and things like that. So people, secondary to that would be strategic work. So really making sure if there are things that need to be worked out from a strategy perspective, I'm prioritizing that, because ultimately that trickles down. If the strategy is not determined, everyone else is a bit directionless and unsure of where to go. And then you get down to the detailed work. And I also try and make an assessment as I'm looking at my week, what things are things that can happen without me. Therefore, I can put trust that the people there can make a decision and I don't need to be part of that, and what things do require me to be there to help move it forward, and to prioritize my time around that. The final piece I would say is there is also a discipline to it. And so there is a discipline to say, I'm going to book half a day here, and that's going to be the time I'm going to spend looking at our strategy and really going into some deep work. And I don't care who tries to book some time there or says something's important. It's not going to happen. That time is blocked, and I'm going to keep it blocked. I think if you can build a discipline to look ahead, right, 2, 3 weeks and block your time for the proactive things you want to do ahead of time, then you have the discipline to hold to that, then you're able to much better manage those things that you need to do. If you're not proactive, it'll always be firefighting, and every day will feel chaotic and like you don't get to the things that you want to do. Speaking of which, after this, I should probably get to my slacks. Hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's their kind of direction where I am learning to prioritize things on Monday morning, thinking ahead. What are the key things I want to achieve? Which one are secondary? I think when you have too many things, you just incline to do little things for the sake of achieving something. And then the
Yes.
little things might not get you anywhere because they're little firefighters. And then when you think ahead and you think about exactly what I want to get this week, it helps to
Yeah.
prioritize, as you rightly said.
It does. It does. And look, those who know me will probably tell you that I probably try and do way too much, and I just want to do all the things and kind of get them all done. And so another thing that I've, learned the hard way is being okay with not getting some things done, and actually being able to end the day and go, I just wasn't able to do that, or I wasn't able to answer that Slack or that email. Um, and that's okay. You know, it'll be there tomorrow. Because of that prioritization, I should feel comfortable that it's okay, that it's, not going to cost a whole lot of pain and suffering to other people. And, being okay with that is important. Otherwise, you'll transition to product leadership, which is good. And then you'll go insane, which is bad, or burn out, which is also bad. So do make sure you feel comfortable stepping away from things at time as well.
It is very true. Really hard to switch off your mind because you always have so many things to do and think about. But without
Correct.
rest, you cannot
Yeah,
recharge.
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Tanya. Andrew.
Hi, Toby.
Hey, Andrew. Good
Um,
to see you.
good to see you again. Question for you as a product leader. This is, I'm not asking you to generalize, but as a product leader for your team, are you acting like a stakeholder for them in terms of their decision-making autonomy, or a trusted advisor, or are you expecting to be partly accountable for the decisions that they make? How do you kind of manage that relationship?
Um, you tell me if this helps answer the question, but at a kind of first principle level, those kind of things I talked about, like who are you as a leader, right? Like what are your opinions and thoughts? For me, um, a first principle is I'm ultimately accountable for my entire team and what we do. Now, what I mean by that is not that I'm accountable to go in and make sure I'm in every meeting and ensuring that they don't do anything but what I say. But I have a wholehearted trust in them, which is earned and given, that they know what they're doing, that they're smart, that they will solve problems. But ultimately, the accountability at the end of the day of what we do and the decisions we make will come back to me. So there's two things to that. One, hopefully that means if things do go wrong, I can step in and ensure that I take accountability and look at how we better improve things. Maybe they weren't supported, maybe they weren't, given the right things to be successful. So I can change that. But two, it also means that if from what they're telling me or they're sharing back, there are things that I need to coach, change, tweak, provide feedback on, I'll ensure I do that really candidly and hopefully help in a helpful way to increase their chance of success, because I feel that accountability to ensure they're successful.
Yeah, that's really nice. Thank you. Do you rely on those one-to-ones as your primary source of info for whether things are going well or not, or as a leader, what are your other indicators just to help you get a more rounded picture of how things are going for your team?
Yeah, certainly one-on-ones help. Skip levels, so that's where I have one-on-ones with my managers report, so I can, talk to them directly and understand their worlds and what they're doing. And then a lot of the operational piece that I called out there. So be it sort of our general ceremonies where we might have demos from teams where they share back what they're doing. I would always probably trying to encourage more from, say, our product managers to come and book time with me to say, look, we've done some work. This is our thinking. Want to share it back with you. And that's, that shouldn't be a sort of polished, hey, hopefully this is the perfect thing. It should be, here's our work, here's our thinking, feedback, thoughts, get you across it. So then you can understand it, call out anything we haven't thought about or contribute. And there's sort of ongoing regular ceremonies like delivery reviews. We have fortnightly product team meeting, which is also a way to kind of cover off things that I can share back, get their feedback in, or they can share back and ask me about. So all of those operational ceremonies are factored in and around that aspect of not relying just on one-on-ones to ensure you know what's going on. And kind of keep across things. But I don't keep across everything, right? I don't know everything that's going on. And so
You
that's
can't.
no, you can't. That's the thing. Tanya, to your point, like I'll go insane. And so that is where the trust comes in and the hiring of great people. And probably most importantly, the growth of great people, because if I'm not growing them and uplifting them, how can I, expect them to go out there and do really great things that I don't have time to be part of?
That's wonderful. Thanks so much, Toby.
No worries, no worries. Hey, Andre, how are you?
Hey, Toby, good, thanks. Hey, you mentioned skip one-on-ones, and that's quite a new concept to me. So I was wondering, could you just give a little insight how that actually works?
Sure. Yes, skip levels are, I think, sort of used generally, I think, pretty, nothing I invented, nothing special there. But they are essentially where you, as a manager, you book regular catch-ups with your broader team. So usually your direct reports, but it can also be with others. It's called a skip level because technically you're skipping a level of your kind of organization hierarchy, I guess you could say, to go down to a layer deeper. So you're not just getting your managers telling you what's going on, you're going to the coalface and saying, hey, what's really going on in your world? So I hold those monthly with each individual. They're really, I hope, this is the purpose of them. They're an open, safe space for them to come and talk to me about anything. So I might have a question or two, but I tend not to try and come with a preloaded set of, you just give me what I want, and make it more a space where they can come in and talk to me about anything top of mind for them. That might be, hey, I don't get to hear too much about the big strategy conversations you're having. Could you tell me a bit about that? So, because I'm interested in it. It might be, hey, I want to transition to product leadership. What could I be doing in this space in Xero or whichever team and company we're in to do that? What would you be your feedback for me? But ultimately just a chance for them to share back with me. And the thing that I always value a lot is feedback for me, right? Is how they feeling about the team, where we're going, what we're doing, their role and all of that. Because as soon as I know that, then I can actually take action on it, which is always what I'm trying to do, is find out how to better take action as opposed to just do what I think is right.
So as it
So
branches
that's how I
down,
work.
as it branches down to like 16 people or something like that,
Yep.
you wouldn't be able to do 16 hours a month just on that, would you? So it's probably quite selective.
Well, I do the 3 managers, and there's about, I think it's another 12. So yeah, can
Oh,
get
so
up there.
so essentially, like one level down, pretty much everyone gets to do it once a month.
Yeah, try to, if not bi-monthly.
Oh yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's this prioritization, right? To me, that's important time, because it gives me a lot of insights and things that can help me ensure I'm getting the right direction impact in our team. So by investing in that time, I hopefully get a 10x return on what I'm able to adjust and kind of put into our team.
Impressive. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Jenny.
Kia ora, Toby. Yeah, so I'm also at Trade Me like you were, and I look after quite a few gnarly product areas. So
Nice.
it's very
Nice.
relatable, your story. And I really like how you framed your answers to Tanya and Andrew. So as a leader, your people are your customer and their results reflect on you, like what you were talking about with a 10x
Yep.
return.
Yep.
And so while solving customer problems to create business values, like my bread and butter, I'm here because I'm really interested in that transition to product leadership. And I'd love to understand further your transition from individual contributor to that first people leadership role. Because you mentioned you formed your position on leadership and you read some books. So how did you form that? What books did you read? And were there any other actions that helped you do that?
Cool. Yes. Yeah, I'll show you some books in a moment. I've got a number that I have read. I'll recommend the ones I have read rather than just pick the top 10 list and pretend I have. But I think, to your question, there is a point where you want to transition to leadership because you're doing that IC role really well, right? You feel like you're pretty confident in it. You built your product skill set, and that's important because it can be hard to transition to product leadership without understanding how do you do that role well. How do you do an IC role well? Because you're going to have to coach and guide and ultimately hold accountability on people around the quality of their work. So if you can't judge it, that becomes hard. But once you do that, yeah, it is about starting to consider those other aspects, especially the people and the operational part of running a team. So for me, yeah, the reading side, a lot of podcast listening as well, was part of just kind of getting a whole lot of different thoughts and principles on these different areas. Leadership was one, managing people was another. Even one of the books, is things like the Phoenix Project and team topologies, which is a little more, everything from DevOps to team structures, and just kind of trying to work out like what are these things and why do people think about them. So that was one. The second one is, and Colab is kind of founded on these principles, which is there's a lot of this theoretical learning, right? So the frameworks and the concepts and things. And then there's the cold hard reality of the very complex and messy world. And so that is where, real humans who are in those roles provide you some of the best context and understanding. And so for me, that was about going out and finding mentors or people that I could sit down with and take some of those areas and sort of say, listen, strategy, at a product leadership level, how do you think about that? What do you do to create your strategy? People, managing people, where this book says, you should do this. Is that true? Oh no, it turns out people are much more complex than a book. And also, there's a lot more to it. And so that gave me this sort of, I don't know, quant and qual almost, to use the product, kind of world, to be able to start to understand, I see there's some theories here and they apply in this way, but there's also this reality that you have to take into account. And off the back of that, I started to form my own opinions. And part of that, which I do think is important, I think we cover in our advanced product management thing, is who are you? Right? If you were to call, say, what's your leadership style today? Because you will have one, right? If you've got to go into your team and you've got to kick off a new product discovery or something, you have a certain style you do that in, And so starting to reflect on who you are as a leader, maybe your growth areas, your strengths, and starting to build on those and saying, okay, actually, I'm a bit of a hand wavy, let's get excited team leader. Like, okay, that's my strength. That's what I bring. And, maybe my strengths aren't so much on spending hours on analysis. And so that's okay. What I would speak to is how I would balance my leadership to ensure that weakness and strength is kind of considered and applied. So yeah, those are a couple things that I focused on in terms of building that out. And like I said, I put my hand up to put myself in the uncomfortable position in my career when I saw it to enact leadership, I guess, whether that was just those icy elements of there is a thing over here we want someone to kind of lead and solve. Could you go do that? And, if you want to enact some leadership, that's a really good way to do it. My team will tell you, I'm sure, that they all try and run out of the room when I turn up for our team meetings and say, I've got a few things I would like to do, because it usually means that they're going to be voluntold to take on opportunities. And that's because I think they're fantastic opportunities for people to just do more than their current role and put into practice leadership, which will hopefully grow them to be able to take that step themselves if they want to. So yeah, they do get me giving them lots of additional opportunities. And the books, Jenny, before I get to you, Andre, let's jump to those just so everyone else can be able to see those as well. So for all of those on the live stream, obviously, if you do have questions that come out of this as we go through it, sharing the screen. Sorry. Someone just check that sharing the screen.
Doesn't seem to be coming up. Just it says you've started screen sharing for me, but not seeing any content.
And it says you need to double click to enter full screen mode.
All right, let's play with the technology. Share some view, please. Let's hold. That's sharing back up and running. Okay, doesn't want to let me share the screen. That's okay. I can read them to you so that you know what they are. So in terms of books, these are just some that I read and found to be useful.
We saw your PowerPoint just now.
How's
Yes,
that?
let's come back. We've got some reading.
Good. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Technology problem solved. Great leadership. There we are. All right. So, Jenny, you had the question. So books, $1 Trillion Coach, I really liked. Just a really interesting book around how some pretty famous leaders were kind of coached on their leadership style, which I really liked as a reflection on the fact that, CEOs, executive leaders of huge companies like Google, they also need to learn how to lead. And so there are a lot of good takeaways there. Probably my go-to recommendation for anyone who's sort of interested in that step into people leadership as part of product leadership, Making of a Manager. Julie Zhao, who was I believe the first design leader for Facebook. And it talks all about all the things she did wrong as a first-time people leader, and then what she recommends, and just some great, things around the actual operational part of being a people leader, from one-on-ones to what's the actual role of being a people leader. So I recommend that. As I mentioned, the Phoenix Project, if you want to really think about the operational kind of world that you play in as a product leader in a technology company, I think it's just a really nice broad lens to consider. And unfortunately, you can't just step into product leadership and just be solely focused on product management. As a leader, you are now an accountable part of the whole business, and so you should understand how the whole business works. So I thought this was a really good book. Classic, most people should know this, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. You need to know this because people are tricky, and as a leader, you're a part of a wider team, usually working with other leaders, and you need to understand how to do that well. And then this one is one that I read last year. Yeah, just kind of, very US Navy SEALs and what they do, but some pretty core leadership elements in there, that sort of accountability aspect that I spoke to, and just, kind of calls out those pure leadership elements that go into how a team operates very, very well under high pressure, and how their leaders operate to enable a team in there. So final one is, if you're transitioning to product leadership, you do need to have a grasp of strategic thinking. You will get pulled into more strategic conversations. You will be more accountable for the strategic decisions made for your team or your product. And so you do need to understand it. Do recommend this book, and going through that. And it's some of the stuff I base when I run the product strategy cohort, which Andrew was part of, to go through this. It's also, I think, sort of imperative that you can begin to understand what this world of strategy is. And it's not a big, scary beast. Once you break it down, it can be quite simple as well. So there we go. There's some of my book recommendations around transitioning to product leadership. Recommend you do check those out, and definitely have a read of them if you want to have a look at them. All right. Andre, let's jump across to you for some final questions before we do wrap up.
Yep, thanks, Toby. Yeah, just going back to when you said you put yourself out there for stretch projects and, out of your comfort zone. Have you
Yep.
ever had a situation where you put your hand up a little bit too fast and realized, oh crap, this is actually a bit bigger than I could handle? And then what did you do after that? How did you handle that?
Yeah, I think that probably happened like 95% of the time. Yeah, I think a lot of the time, there's a couple of things to assess. The first is, let's make sure I'm not being ridiculous and putting my hand up where I can't actually contribute value, or, completely, crazy to think that this is something I could do well to lead. I think you need to be pragmatic to that. And it's not just about grabbing anything and everything because you can. I think you still want to be pragmatic to where can you have impact and what can you contribute well to. However, sometimes you will get into things and you're like, right, well, that's way above my, skill set or understanding. But what's interesting is, to me, that's where good leadership comes out. Because if you're putting your hand up for those things, it shouldn't be because you want to be the star of the show and do it all. It should be because you want to be a leader who's going to be able to rally the right people, the right team, and the right approach that's going to solve whatever that problem is. And so that was generally my approach, is not so much that I was going in to kind of be the hero and solve it, but that I wanted to go in and bring great people. And usually it's a lot of fun because you have some awesome people and you go out and find these people and bring them together. And the real enjoyment and things that I got from it was seeing how you bring individuals together around a complex problem and leverage their strengths and give them the right direction or the right approach that helps solve that thing that when you looked at it by yourself, you're like, this is impossible. I have no idea how you would solve this. And then these brilliant people come in and they do a whole lot of things. You're like, that's amazing. And kind of you've made that happen through your leadership.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yes. There's a lot of fun opportunities out there if you look. Okay. If you are on the live stream and listening in, I hope there was some, really interesting things you can get from what we discussed, what I shared. But if you do have your own questions, which are obviously slightly hard to get through the old LinkedIn live stream, then would very much invite you to reach out. You're welcome to connect on LinkedIn or post a comment under the LinkedIn event so I can make sure I answer those as well. And given we're at 12:51, I would just say maybe one or two final questions if anyone had them here on the call. Very happy to answer any last questions.
I have one question about transitioning to the bigger strategy from more kind of smaller individual contributor level. I used to do it from kind of going wide, and then you narrow down and you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and why not other things. But when you're working on bigger projects, you just don't have ability to kind of get all the details. You need to make a call and make a strategy based on high level information that you have.
Yep.
How to transition to that broad strategy without confidence that you know everything and still kind of having confidence that you're making the right decisions, not some decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess much like my answer to Andre there, I think it starts to become the more you transition into product leadership, the more you need to trust and work with other leaders or your team to provide that detail and input. Certainly an advocate for sort of top-down, bottom-up flywheels where you won't be able to go down and understand all the detail. Now, you want to try and understand as much as you can because there's nothing worse than a product leader sort of saying, that product idea sucks. And the team's like, well, you just don't know the product. So you want to understand your products, but what I find is you're trying to work horizontally with your other leaders, so your engineering, design, whoever, to ensure they're contributing into your strategy thinking, and you as a collective leadership team are working through those decisions and considerations. And therefore, it's less of you as a product leader having to make all the decision by yourself and try and learn as much as possible, but you're using a leadership group to contribute. And that's also why I would advocate for any leader to not just focus on their own discipline, because ultimately you start to become a group of leaders responsible for the overall decisions. And so if you can't have some understanding of your engineering design counterparts world and challenge or ask tough questions, you can't help each other arrive at the best strategic decisions. So that's the vertical. The that's the horizontal. Let's talk about the vertical. I've been talking for too long. So on the vertical, that is where I think you want to formulate your higher level thinking, right? Which is without the details. That tends to be more looking at the market, looking at your product and positioning, etc. And then starting to think about, well, what do we need, to start winning with that strategy? And that's where you're going down to, the teams who do have that expertise ideally, and they do know that domain back to front, and they do know what the customers want, numbers 1 to 10. And getting that input back and getting that information, taking that and sort of putting it back in, maybe making some calls and pushing those back down. And so you create that flywheel of kind of information flow, considerations, sense checks, backup, to ensure that you're leveraging it to help ensure you don't have to be the one that has to know everything to make all the decisions. And then the very tough part comes with how you assess what certain teams would want to do against the bigger picture and make some calls on trade-offs, because you won't be able to do it all. And at the end of the day, what someone would really like to do in their area might have to be a no. And that's where it starts to get to the crux of strategic decisions to pick your wins.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Toby, would you be
Okay.
able to share those links to the books?
Yes, sure. Let me post a comment on the collab, or we'll share it via the collab LinkedIn. So if people are not following that page, jump on there, follow it. And we'll make sure that we post out that list that I showed, and you'll be able to find those in any good Amazon web store. So you can have a look at those and kind of, yeah, access those books. But listen, to wrap up here, and thanks so much for joining. It was a pleasure to have those of you who joined live and said hello and asked some questions, and everyone watching online. The final thing I would say is, if you want to transition to product leadership, you have to want to lead. It can't be something that you just think is the career thing you should do, and you suppose you should probably go do that next step in the ladder. I highly encourage you to really think about, do you want to do leadership? Because it is different to the IC product management work you will be doing on a single product or in those roles. And it's tough. It is tough. You know, there is a lot in the day-to-day that is hard work. And if you're not passionate about it, you're not passionate about the people, or passionate about providing that leadership, and while there's tough parts, there's good parts, it'll be very, very hard to transition because you just won't like it. And that will make it tough. So do have a think about that, and then do have a think about those things that I talked about in terms of, you know, how can you soak up those opportunities? How can you find what it means for you to be a leader, and the principles that you would have around those different areas of product, operations, and people? And then how can you start to learn from great leaders around you and put those things together so you can start to find the opportunities where you can transition to product leadership. And when you do, you find that you've already actually been doing it. All right, been a pleasure, everyone. Fantastic to share a little bit. Please reach out if you have any follow-up questions. Available on LinkedIn. You're very welcome to DM and get in touch. Otherwise, just another hopefully useful thing from Collab as we try and help all of you continue to grow those product careers and be successful out there. Good luck with all the hard, gnarly product work. I hope you make it through Friday and have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Toby.